So he's been very catalytic here in the fourth quarter.
The final five is presented by Ford.
Randle turns it over.
Randle. 16 seconds left. Randle with a running start. Spin. Loses the ball.
The definition of a star player in the NBA is pretty subjective. Do you base it on the All-Star selections, All-NBA selections, or maybe it's just based on their numbers, their value, and what they bring to their respective team? Is it the best player on a given team? Second best? Third best? Whatever it is, most people would agree that what truly defines a star player in the NBA is how they show up in the postseason. You can have all the success in the world in the regular season. Hell, you could even win the regular season MVP. But it means nothing if you come out flat when it matters the most on the biggest stage. It's one of the things guys like Rudy Gobert, Karl Anthony Towns, even Donovan Mitchell, as well as DeMar DeRozan have been criticized for. Players who most would consider to be all-star level players in the NBA, but who have continued to underperform when it comes to the postseason. Not always, but for the most part, their performance in the postseason has drastically dropped in the playoffs overall. But while some of these players have been known to go MIA in the playoffs, none can compare to that of the New York Knicks quote-unquote star player in Julius Randle, who is quite possibly one of the worst postseason performers in NBA history for a man who has been selected as an NBA All-Star. Just how bad, you ask? Well, let's talk about it. If you're new to the channel and you enjoy this type of content, then be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a video, and in return, I'll be providing more NBA content like this. Now, it's important to note that Julius Randle has quite possibly been one of the most up and down players we have seen in the NBA, going from being a top-level recruit, number 2 overall, coming out of high school in the nation in 2013, only behind Andrew Wiggins, to being selected number 7 overall in what was thought to be a stacked 2014 draft class, gets injured in the first game of his rookie season with the Lakers, proceeds to get better after coming back healthy, but was wildly inconsistent on offense and was even perceived to be a bit lazy at times, not as motivated, and didn't have the drive that you would like to see from most players. He goes on to have a breakout season with the New Orleans Pelicans, picks up a big contract from the Knicks after having said breakout season, then regresses slightly in his first year in New York, then goes on to have one of the best seasons yet of his career, gets his first All-Star selection after the Knicks go on to have one of their best seasons in a decade as a team, wins Most Improved Player of the Year, gets selected second team All-NBA, signs an even fatter contract extension with the Knicks after an incredible season, wets the bed in the Knicks' first playoff appearance in nearly a decade, comes back the following season, underperforms, his demeanor, body language, attitude completely shifts, while the Knicks as a team failed to even make the play-in after finishing 4th in the East the year prior. It was as if Randle only showed up well when he was in a contract year, similar to after his breakout season with the Pelicans. And while Randle stepped it up this season, also helped the Knicks, added Jalen Brunson, who has been phenomenal for them, but Randle was selected as an All-Star yet again, putting up over 25 points per game and 10 rebounds on solid efficiency. But once the playoffs hit, Randle, yet again, has borderline turned himself into a liability for the Knicks, where he has almost become unplayable late in games. Why? How can an all-star player, who most would consider to be one of the best, if not the best player on the Knicks, be so bad when it matters the most? Is Julius Randle just maybe not as good as we were all led to believe? Well, here are some numbers for context when we talk about just how bad Randle has been in the postseason. In Randle's playoff career, which mind you, up until now has only been in 3 playoff series, but at the time of this recording, Julius Randle is shooting just 32% on nearly 18 shot attempts per game from the field in his career in the postseason. According to StatMuse, that is the worst shooting percentage by any player putting up at least 15 attempts per game in the postseason since 1970. Yeah, before the shot clock era and the NBA-ABA merger. It gets worse though, when you specifically look at his three-point shooting, where Randle is throwing up threes on over 7 attempts per game while shooting it at a 25% clip. This man doesn't care how many times he misses from deep. He doesn't care if the team isn't down in the paint to box out and get a rebound when he's chucking up said threes. He doesn't even care if he's being heavily contested and working in isolation. He's going to shoot his shot. Credit to his overall confidence in letting it fly from behind the arc, but there is also a fine line between confidence and borderline delusional when having such little self-awareness of the flow of the game and what's working well for you and your team. Randle also hasn't been getting to the line like you see from him in the regular season, not driving to the paint, posting up, and trying to draw contact. So far, he's averaging just 4.3 free throw attempts in the postseason compared to over 7 attempts he obtained in the regular season. You want to talk about him being a liability on the court for your team? How about the fact that Randle, for his career, is averaging close to 4 turnovers per game in the postseason, one of the highest in the league, and don't even get me started with his defense, which has never really been that good, but in the playoffs it has reached new levels of bad, as Randle has been a net negative on that end of the floor in his postseason career and has one of the worst defensive ratings in the playoffs so far this season. And this is coming from one of the top defensive teams in the playoffs this year. Say what you will about the advanced metrics player efficiency rating, which measures a player's overall efficiency on both ends of the floor. Yeah, it has its flaws like a lot of advanced stats, but Julius Randle, for his playoff career, has a PER of less than 10. That is the worst PER by any player putting up more than 12 shot attempts in the postseason in NBA history. This is supposed to be your all-star player. What is going on here? It's one thing to struggle in the playoffs, have a bad few games here and there, but it's another thing to absolutely choke and look like a completely different player in the postseason. Well, the problem is Julius Randle and his game is actually incredibly limited, which isn't as apparent in the regular season because in the regular season, you're not always playing against the best teams in the league. Teams aren't studying the ins and outs of your game and putting together a game plan around your skills as heavily as a team that is going to be facing off against you in a 7-game series and will try and pick apart all of your weaknesses. And the fact of the matter is, the playoffs are still a different beast. The level of play, effort, and defensive intensity is amplified. What you might have been able to get away with in the regular season on offense isn't going to be the case in the playoffs. You have to be at the top of your game with little margin for error. And for a player like Julius Randle, who doesn't play defense and can virtually only attack in isolation on offense when defenses are at the top of their game, is a recipe for disaster. What Randle fails to recognize is that what works for him in the regular season is not going to fly in the playoffs. Playing iso ball, taking poorly contested shots while your team stands around watching you is not going to work. Ball movement, player movement, spacing, maximum effort on defense is critical in the playoffs. Having the IQ and wherewithal to read the game and adjust your play as a result is paramount. Julius Randle simply does not have that. It's why you see teammates getting frustrated with his play. It's why you see Coach Tom Thibodeau not giving him the kind of minutes he saw in the regular season, although still a lot of minutes. And it's why you've seen the Knicks play exceedingly better when Randle is off the court. This is a problem, and a problem that likely won't be resolved aside from him just being benched down the stretch. And for a Knicks team that has actually played so well together all season, including winning their first playoff series in over a decade, Randle has single-handedly been shooting this team out of games. The Knicks have, fortunately enough, just been so good and locked in on defense, they've been able to erase Randle's poor offense and make up for it. That might have worked against a team like the Cavs, who are young and inexperienced. It's not going to be the same thing against a team like the Miami Heat, who are playing some of their best basketball of the season with a player like Jimmy Butler, who has been playing out of his mind. And for the Knicks, who haven't made it to the conference finals since the year 2000, could be looking at another playoff exit if they don't take a hard look and realize their star player has actually become one of their worst players. Let me know what you guys think. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.